Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our entitled parents. In today's episode, I don't care if you're living here, my daughter wants to rent. Entitled MIL can't believe she might need to pay for her own housing. Father says he has a say in land I own. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. I don't care if you're living here, my daughter wants to rent. As with many folks, I didn't think I had anything to contribute here, but when I actually read the sign on our front door for the first time in a few months, I remembered a good one. My wife and I moved to Mississippi after getting married. She's a native and I'm from out of state. We met online and had the wedding in my hometown. She had a full ride and assistantship at Mississippi State, so it didn't make sense to have her give that up. We were fortunate in that her grandfather had an extra property he wasn't using, and he lets us stay there rent-free. It's a crap shack in the middle of the woods that was built by an idiot who has no business playing with Legos, much less building an actual structure, but hey, it's free. I can only complain so much. My wife's schedule varies greatly by the day, which saw her alone at the house while I was working when the entitled mother showed up. EM, entitled mother. W, wife. Gil, grandfather-in-law. So my wife is hanging out in the living room, doing some work before she has to leave for class, when she hears someone drive up. Our house is really out of the way, so we don't get guests. She was going to get her handgun when she sees a slightly older lady walk by the window. Not seeing a threat, she went and answered the door when the knock came. W, can I help you? EM, yes, I wanted to talk about renting this place for my daughter. W, oh, sorry, but me and my husband are living here. EM, well, my daughter is in college and needs a place to stay. W, well, that's great and all, but like I said, I live here. EM, I was hoping to talk to GIL? W, getting irritated, no, the house isn't for. EM, I know him personally, you see, and I wanted to talk to him about renting. W, I don't care if you know him, your daughter can't stay here. My husband and I live here, what aren't you getting about that? EM, young lady, I'm sure GIL won't appreciate that you're talking to me like this. W, I'm sure my grandfather won't care that I told you your daughter is going to have to find another place to live. EM looks shocked at the mention that Gil is actually my wife's grandfather and she wasn't some random squatter living in his house. She huffs, turns on her heel, and goes back to her car. My wife goes back inside and uses a sturdy note card to create a sign that is taped to our door to this day. We are not and will not be renting. Management. Edit, getting a lot of questions about why my wife went to grab her gun. We live in a very isolated area outside a small, poor town. You have to go out of your way to get to our house, and the only people who visit us are our in-laws. They do so very rarely and always call before coming. Someone driving up to our house is suspicious for these reasons. We're not preparing to take shots at the first sign of movement, we're just being prepared in case the worst comes about. That is the most amazing sign she made. Glad you got a kick out of it. Just imagine the EM trying to get her college-aged daughter a room when, like I said, the daughter is college-aged and is probably very much able to search for a house/room herself. I mostly feel bad for her, as I do for most everyone with a Karen for a mom. She was going to get her handgun when she sees a slightly older lady walk by the window. Definitely wife material. Don't have to tell me twice, man. I didn't even have to teach her to shoot, she already knew what was up when we started dating. Did you guys mention it to her grandfather? Curious what he had to say about this lady as she apparently knew him? As a native of Mississippi myself, this seems very much like something that would happen in MS. Entitled MIL can't believe she might need to pay for her own housing. I just want to vent. I'd been with my husband about 15 years and we were very LC with his family for most of it because he couldn't stand them. I probably only met his mom 3 to 4 times even though we lived in the same city. Well, 2 years ago, we get a call from Adult Protective Services. She was in the hospital after calling 911, and when they'd gone to get her, the apartment she shared with her daughter, who was also an entitled piece of shit, a whole other story, was in such bad condition that they didn't want to release her back there. I'm sure they were happy to find someone else to take her, so we almost didn't even question whether there were other options and we agreed to take her. We moved her in. It's been a nightmare. She's very entitled and narcissistic. She doesn't have much income because she hardly ever worked, so it's pretty measly Social Security. She spends about half her monthly income on cigarettes. We so love smelling it all the time. She does smoke outside, luckily. When we first got her and she was pretty frail and it was winter, we let her smoke in the garage, which was a huge mistake and turned into a giant tantrum when we finally put a stop to it. Lucky for her, she gets Medicare fully paid for by the state and gets some food stamps, but we don't charge her anything. She's a total slob, has probably taken 5 to 6 showers in 2 years, and we really resent having her here now. She never cleans after herself, makes noise constantly, and frequently acts like a child and throws tantrums. For instance, she ran out of a chocolate muffin she likes but still had cake and other snacks. She huffed and slammed the pantry and said, "I guess I'll just have to go without, as usual." We make sure she gets all her meds, gets food even if her food stamps run out, and drive her to all medical appointments. Some are 90 miles away and take 4 hours. But yeah, she goes without. I wish we'd tried to find an alternative earlier, but we finally are trying. Today I took her to meet with a social worker about Section 8 housing. She made it off the waiting list and we're waiting to see how much she might get and whether we can find her a studio or something. The lady explained that she would have to pay 30 to 40% of her income toward the rent. MIL started ching about it immediately, how they were going to take all her money. I'm just sitting here, you live in my house for free, why shouldn't you have to pay something toward your own basic needs such as housing? WTF? Good job on working on Section 8 housing. You've done your time, and celebrate when she has her own place. Can't wait. Housing is pretty hard to find where we live, so I'm sure it's going to be a process. Once you get her out, do not let her back in under any circumstances. If she finally does get housing, she very well might sabotage it. She would rather keep her 30 to 40% and continue to mooch off you. Be prepared for this. Create a plan on how to deal with it. Make it clear to her that you will not be an option after a certain day. And make sure your hubby is on board with it too. Thanks, definitely worried about it and agree, we will tell her too bad. State nursing home is the only alternative. I am worried she will let her abusive deadbeat daughter move in. You two are doormats, too bad for you. What would you do? Kick her out and make her homeless? It's like we share a MIL. My grandpa-in-law helped us with the down payment on our house under the condition that we let my MIL live with us. He knows she is incapable of being on her own, and she has done nothing but destroy every room she's lived in. She moves around the house after she makes one room unlivable, currently took over our entire basement, and sits at home all day watching TV and letting her dog shit on our floor. I know the feels. Kick her. Father says he has a say in land I own. This may get long-winded and I apologize. I, 31 am the youngest of my dad's 4 children, and I am the only child of my mother. By the time I was born, my siblings were grown, moved out and had their own lives. My mother has a disease that she has battled my entire life, and honestly is amazing that she is still living, as Dr. S never gave her this long. Neither of my parents are wealthy, heck they don't even have a 401k, but they played their cards right and they are completely debt-free. This fortunate move has allowed them to live a comfortable lifestyle, even able to put back money for projects my father wants to do on his land. With that said, when I was 21, they gave me 30 acres of raw land of their 80 acres as an early inheritance. When they did this, they told me it was because in the worst case my mother's health gets even worse and requires extensive care which they couldn't afford, and the hospital would have to in that case, put a lien on the farm and steal my inheritance. My father said this was very important to him given the fact that when my sisters still lived at home, he had an extremely well-paying corporate job and they got anything and everything they wanted. In contrast, when I came along, he and my mother sold almost all they had, quit their jobs and built a house on some land with the intent of living a more simple life and off the land. In doing such, this meant that most of my childhood, my father was self-employed, and since he couldn't afford help, I was the help. So I worked for free 90% of the time for my dad, as it was the responsibility of the family as a whole. Since it was all I had ever known, it, along with many other things, mostly religion, society norms, etc., seemed normal. I now know it is not. Not long after being given the land, I started building a house on the land. There was a lot of things that happened between then and now, but that is a whole series of stories that I will not include here, but may do so on my profile if anyone is interested. Fast forward to present day. I am happily married with our first child living in a house that my wife had bought before we had gotten together, as the house I had started on 10 years ago is still not complete. As I said, lot of craziness in the last decade, lol. When my wife and I had gotten married almost 2 years ago, I guess my parents assumed we would finish that house and live on that land in order to be next door so they could enjoy their grandchild. I know it's healthy for a child to have her grandparents part of their life. I have some severe trust issues with them due to not only the cult-like upbringing I had, but also the fact they are friends with and make excuses for a convicted pedo that are at pet his own daughters. I've tried talking sense into my parents on this matter, but it always turns into a screaming match with them saying they raised me better than this and to forgive all who trespass. Yes, some things I'm not gonna forgive or look over. Recently I informed my parents that my wife and I are currently house shopping and are hoping to get a bigger house for our growing family. Well, as you can imagine, this conversation go interesting as my father said, "You have almost a new house that's almost done on the land I gave you, you can finish it and live there." When I told him we decided that was not what we wanted to do, he backhandedly suggested that my wife was manipulating me so that she can have the house she wants. He also said that they gave me that land with the understanding that I was going to raise my family on it, in the same way they raised me right down to religious matters. I reminded him that the reason he and my mother said they were giving it to me was so a hospital wouldn't get it. Looking that seems like such BS. He basically called me a liar, and that whatever my wife and I decided to do with the land, he should be included in the conversation as it directly impacts him. While the land is next to his, there is in no way it can impact him as he has their own water, electric services, and road frontage/access. On top of that, my parents also harass my wife daily for pics and videos of our child, and even request that she send them pics of the baby in certain clothes. As alluded to above, there is way more to the backstory, but needless to say, in recent years I have had the desire to move farther away from that land, but this level of entitlement from my parents has just about solidified it for me. So should he and my mother have a say in what my wife and I do with the land and unfinished house? It's all fully paid for and valued at over $350,000 plus only. Edit. Wow, just wow, I am absolutely blown away by all the words or encouragement and advice that I have been given here over the last 24 hours. Thank you so much. One point of confusion I noticed is the land ownership, so please let me clarify. Back when I was 21, my parents had hired a surveyor to section off part of their farm to give to me as an early inheritance, and it is in my name and my name alone, and it along with the house is 100% paid for. Also, the house is still undone as life has not been simple in those 10 years. 2 divorces, 3 miscarriages with my first wife, and a stint in the military. When I got with the woman that is now my wife, she wasn't keen on moving into a construction site, especially when she had already bought a house, and I can't blame her. Again, thank you all for the input and outward perspective. I will keep you all posted when something new happens, and since there has been some interest, I may post some things about my weird, best word I can think of for it, upbringing, especially when it comes to religion. Sheesh, I'll need a few drinks for that post, lol. Thank you all again, cheers. It's only healthy for a child to have their grandparents in their life if they are healthy role models, otherwise you only teach your children to normalize and put up with toxic behavior for the sake of family, and the cycle of control and toxicity continues. If it's in your name, I don't think he really has any weight in the decisions at all. Too bad for them that they showed their red flags early and put you off from living next door. If they have no boundaries now, they won't have any if all they have to do is walk next door. I also recommend info diets. There's no need to talk through everything with them, you'll find a lot less drama if you don't share all your plans. Block him on everything, build a fence, put up cameras, and formally trespass him. I've told my wife I'm thinking of setting up some cameras out there. Just hate the idea of another bill to pay on top of a newborn. Gotta love this ride called life, lol. Don't forget to sell that land so you can buy other land further away. NO is a complete sentence in a case like this. He has nothing to say about your property. This is very true, I just know there will be an extremely high level of drama and guilt tripping. Both parents have used my mother's poor health as a guilt trip tool. I'm close to my mom as she homeschooled me K-12. As you/evening ad 2820 stated, no is a perfectly valid complete sentence. With that said, maybe finish the house and rent it out for enough to cover taxes, maintenance, etc. Or tear down what's been built and use it to grow hay, which can then be sold to local agricultural customers, horse owners, etc. Either hire someone to harvest, bale, etc., or pay someone part of the yield to do the work. Edit, the wife pointed out you could also set up an AG lease, which is essentially leasing the property to someone else to use it for agricultural purposes. And also that if pedo is near children, they may be violating parole. My wife and I have talked about finishing the house, then subdivide the land so we could afford to buy a real nice house for cash so we can invest most/all our income. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.